Britain's crime problem too. What can you do if you fly to Spain and your luggage ends up in Sweden?
And from Belfast in Northern Ireland, we ask, do we now need more laws to enforce gay rights? Let the buyer beware, not only the cornerstone of commerce, but also plain good advice. Can you really check everything before you buy, though? Claire Kavanagh's come across a horrifying tale of a house purchase, which included a hidden price.
This is the story of a man who thought he'd bought a beautiful house in the country and, of course, the right to drive up to his own front door.
The Lord of the Manor came along and said that I didn't have a right to do this and that I was trespassing over his property and that I should stop doing it.
This is William Hartley Russell, Lord of the Manor, who owns the Bucklebury estate and all the rights of way across it. This is the estate agent who can't make a sale until the Lord of the Manor has been paid his due.
Everybody loses out. Mr. Hartley Russell, of course, knows this. He's got everybody over a barrel, hasn't he?
And this is the man from the council which manages the land and would like to smooth the way.
We'd have taken the view that we'd make a nominal charge and have them have their accesses as they already enjoy them.
This is the area of land that I didn't have the right to drive over when I purchased the property. And as you can see, it's not even the length of my car. When I first moved in, you know, there was no problem. The difficulty came when I wanted to get my vehicle from the common land onto my property. So I created a vehicular access to get onto my property.
The problem stems from the fact that although the council manage the common, it's the Lord of the Manor who owns the common and owns the rights that go with it, including the right to charge residents for driving onto their own land.
You can drive a car on a track, for example, like this track, where there's a public right-of-way for cars, but you can't drive the car off the track onto the rest of the common, because that's against the bylaws. Well, this is a situation where you can see the track here is a track that's a public right-of-way and anyone has the right to pass along. But on the other hand, when you get to this situation, you see there's an intervening area of common land between the public access track and the private property, known in the trade as a ransom strip, and to actually get a right to move from the public track into the private property, you need to cross this land, and to be able to do that, you need to acquire the permission of the owner of it, and they're entitled to make a charge for that.
Nick Cornish wasn't aware of that. By opening up a driveway to his own front door, he fell foul of the Lord of the Manor.
He wrote to me through his solicitor saying that he was going to take out an injunction for me to stop me from driving over onto my property, in which he did. And we had to go to court, and the injunction was served, and I had to then park out on the common and walk from the common onto my property. I wasn't allowed to drive a vehicle over onto my property. If I did, I would have been in contempt of court, and then I would have been in real trouble. He initially asked me to pay £8,000 for the right to drive my car from the common land over onto my property, over 2 strips of land, 12 feet by 3 feet wide. And in the end, we settled for £5,000.
Other house owners on the common discovered they had a problem too. When they put up their houses for sale, they found the Lord of the Manor was the first to show interest in their particulars.
Homeowners realise there's a problem when Mr. Hartley Russell's agent finds in the paper that I've advertised a house for sale, or he's seen one of the for sale boards go up. If they can't show him that they've got a written right of access to the house, he then demands enormous amounts of money for that right.
What kind of figures are we talking about?
Anything between, I should think, 5,000 to 50,000 has been demanded.
Newbury Council has been managing and paying towards the upkeep of the common since 1929, so they challenged Mr. Hartley Russell's right to demand these payments. They got it wrong.
We were advised by a leading council that our right of management extended to granting permission for people to obtain access to the houses. And based on that advice, we took the case to court. The court decided that that wasn't the position and that the scheme of management didn't in any way affect the landowner's rights to charge for granting these access permissions.
What about buying that access to those people's houses? Why can't you do that?
Well, because that would be spending public money for the private advantage of one individual, and that simply wouldn't be right for a local authority to do.
And what about a compulsory purchase order of that land?
It would be far too expensive. The price we'd have to pay in compensation could run into millions of pounds, and again, it would only really advantage a relatively small number of residents.
With that option fenced off, homeowners found themselves at the mercy of Mr. Hartley Russell. Several residents said that they're too frightened to appear on the programme. They're concerned that if they do speak out about the lord of the manor, that he'll charge them even bigger bills for driving up to their own property.
And no one person on his own can afford to fight, or to try to take him on.
Hello, is this the home of Mr. Willie Hartley Russell? We went to see the millionaire landlord at his manor at the edge of the common. We were met by the builders.
Leave a message.
We wanted to know why he's demanding large amounts of money for small strips of land. When we did contact him by telephone later, he refused to comment. So, buyer beware. Mr. Hartley Russell is entirely within his rights, and problems like this do happen throughout the UK. If you want to avoid the problem, then make sure you have a search of the property done. Employ a licensed conveyancer, and make sure your solicitor visits the site in person.
Many of us will be about to fly off on our holidays, but although we've bought an air ticket, what rights do we have to ensure that they deliver us to the right place on the right day, and that we'll even be travelling by air? How can we use the law if something goes wrong on our holiday flight?
Surprisingly, your air ticket doesn't guarantee you your destination, your date or time of departure, or even the quite reasonable expectation that you might be flying. So even if your ticket says you're on a flight direct to Paris, you could in theory find yourself on a bus to a different airport for a different flight to a different city on a different day. So what can you do about it?
One of the very few bits of legislation that can help is a European law which entitles you to compensation if you have a reserved ticket but aren't allowed to board the flight because it's already full. If this happens, then you can demand your money back or ask to be taken on to your destination at the earliest opportunity or at a time that suits you. You should get financial compensation as well. Depending on the distance of the flight and the length of the delay, it might be about £100 to £200. Should you decide to wait for the next available flight, phone calls, meals and overnight accommodation should also be provided if necessary. If you booked the flight with a package tour operator rather than the airline, you'll have to get help from them.
Now that other holiday nightmare, you and your luggage get separated. What should you do if your bags are lost, damaged or delayed?
The Warsaw Convention covers lost and damaged luggage claims, and this is part of our Carriage by Air and Road Act. However, compensation for lost luggage is very low, as claims are settled according to weight rather than the value of the case and its contents. Compensation is limited to about £15 per kilo. To make a claim, fill out a property irregularity report. You can get one of those at the airport. Keep a copy of this with your baggage stubs. If you've taken out travel insurance, often this will offer additional compensation. And if you'd like more information about your legal protection when flying, call the phone number shown at the end of the programme.
Now, 1 in 5 of all people arrested in the UK is on heroin. Shocked? Well, the Home Secretary is said to be stunned by that statistic. The government is promising a so-called drug czar and new laws to deal with a heroin epidemic that's costing hundreds of lives and billions of pounds. But will the new ideas work? Here's Julie Hall.
The life of 5-year-old Dylan Hull is now part of the toll. The fact that the gunning down of a 5-year-old child is now considered fair game in Britain's drug wars has focused public concern in just the way Leah Bett's very different death did 2 years ago. Leah's father, a retired police inspector, now runs a boat charter business alongside his drugs charity work. His wife Jan works with him. The Betts are often first port of call for other parents devastated by the death of a child. Many more teenagers have died taking drugs since Leah's death. Over the last few weeks, Jan and Paul have met a mother whose 13-year-old has just died. Last week, a man rang them in disbelief he'd just lost his 17-year-old boy. For Paul, the priority's the young.
And I've been talking to them, and Jan's been talking to them. It's nothing for a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old to come up and say, my daddy smokes stuff off a tinfoil on a Saturday morning. Does your daddy do that? Already there are 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds and 10-year-old heroin addicts because Mum and Dad have introduced them to it. We've got to all now pull together. We've got to accept that it's reality. It's not a fictionist film. It doesn't happen to somebody else. It happens to you. And you could be the next one.
Ecstasy was the cause of the Betts tragedy, but their work now involves helping all addicts. They found the damage heroin does to people's lives is often the most disturbing.
I didn't start using the drugs till I had my 4th child. It got really bad.
How did you get into it? What started it off?
My husband got a 7-year prison sentence, and when he came home with a heroin habit.
From the prison?
Yeah. I've lost my whole family, but I've still got my 4 babies, and they didn't ask to come here, and I will fight for them till I die. But it's just like history repeating itself. That's what I'm frightened of. My baby's reaching for a release. I dread to think if it happened to one of mine.
But heroin is happening to more and more people's children. Health experts now say Britain has a heroin epidemic. Teenage deaths from the drug are rising by 27% every year. The Prime Minister is currently recruiting a drug czar. Paul Betts is applying. The government is looking for a candidate who can lead what is promised to be an unprecedented campaign against drugs. But it's not just the deaths that are prompting the government to act. It's the cost of drug-related crime which is escalating out of control. A recent survey showed that in just one area of Britain, 1,100 addicts committed 70,000 crimes involving property worth over 34 million over just a 3-month period. On average, that's one addict committing over 5 crimes, costing over £2,500 every week. In Plymouth, police know a call to a burglary is often drugs-linked.
It's the first job of the afternoon. Neighbours phoned up. She's noticed her neighbour's door has been forced, the glass has been smashed. Oh, they've been burgled.
Oh, you're joking. They've only just...
Oh no, they went on Sunday. Yeah, I spoke to the neighbours and what have you. But looks like they've screwed the shed, taken the shears out of the shed, and the final effort has been through the front door.
The intruder left some of the hall.
Right, so it's a carriage clock. The best surface there will be the glass front. Get some fingerprints off that. And interestingly, an air weapon. I'll tell you what, the only thing I found, I've seized it anyway, is an air pistol in the kitchen. Is he the type of guy to have an air pistol in his kitchen? No.
I don't think so. Not in the kitchen, because he's got a little girl.
So I've seized it anyway, because if that's the case, it's a little bit more aggravating.
We had 2 men in custody last week who, over a 6-week period, committed 61 offences of burglary to sustain an amphetamine habit. We have dealt with one individual in this office who was committing between 4 and 6 burglaries of people's sheds or garages, again, to sustain an amphetamine habit.
In Plymouth, the police believe this kind of crime can be cut dramatically by treating addicts in the community and getting them off drugs. The courts, NHS and probation service are working with them. In 2 years, these treatment orders have contributed to a 30% drop in the burglary rate.
There were 103 fewer burglaries this July than there were the same period last year. That's 103 fewer victims. So that has to be good news in itself. 103 fewer people who've had to come home from work or from holiday or from wherever they may have been at the time and have to deal with the trauma of house burglary.
The Betts are in favour of treatment for addicts as long as it's mandatory and it's a prison sentence if you fail. The Kaleidoscope project here in Kingston upon Thames started treating addicts with methadone 30 years ago. Users have to take the methadone in front of staff, so there is no chance of selling it on the black market and buying heroin instead.
With heroin, you take your heroin, you feel great, but then 4 hours later you're feeling dreadful and you've got to get some more. Every 4 hours you go through manic depressive cycles. With methadone, it'll hold you for 30 hours. Now that will enable you gradually to stabilise as a person, look after your kids, do your studies. I mean, we've got 3 people at the moment on our programme who are doing PhD degrees. We've got other people who are doing bachelor degrees. We've got people who work. They wouldn't be able to do that unless they were stable throughout the day.
The big concern that there is at the moment amongst government, amongst people, is the crime that is associated and being committed by people addicted to heroin because they need the money to fund the habit.
That's right.
The people you're describing, are they the people who otherwise would be committing those crimes? I mean, do you really have any impact on the crime level?
Oh, definitely. Statistics can show that the reduction is steep. There's no need now for £80 worth of crime a day.
And that would be what they'd be looking to get in order to buy heroin?
So they'd have to steal 3 times that amount.
I mean, as a former police inspector, does that sound a good idea to you?
If a person can be, dare I say, brought back to normality, taken away from the drug scene and become a useful member of society again, that's got to be far better than bunging them inside. We pay them for their keep, they're keeping up their habit of not being treated, and when they're released, they're worse off than when they first went in.
The government is considering launching schemes like the one here in Plymouth nationwide. The savings are considerable. It costs £3,000 a year to treat a user this way, compared with £20,000 in prison. If you need information about drugs, you can contact the National Drugs Helpline. Their number is in this week's fact sheet.
At the moment, it's perfectly legal for an employer to sack somebody within 2 years of them taking on a job purely because they're homosexual. Should the law be changed to give equal rights to gays and lesbians, or is a degree of discrimination required to protect the health and morals of our society?
The law in Northern Ireland often lags behind the rest of the UK. In England and Wales, the act of male homosexuality stopped being a criminal offence back in 1967. But homosexuals here had to go to the European Court, and it took until 1981 to win the same rights. Despite a gay rights campaign going back a quarter of a century, P.A. McLaughlin and his partner are still not treated in the same way as a heterosexual couple.
We do need a little more protection at the moment to make things more equal. Quite a lot of gay people will avoid situations where they can be discriminated against, and you tend to find gay people in the traditional occupations, in the stage, in the hairdressing and entertainment, cookery, etc.
Mandy Shields is 23 and wants to marry her girlfriend. She and her lesbian friends are angry about the way employers and colleagues won't accept them.
What they do in their personal life isn't being brought into the workplace. It's the fact that people know about their personal life and have a problem with it and just won't tolerate them.
We introduced Mandy and PA to 3 people with strong views about gay rights. 2 of them just don't believe homosexuals are entitled to equal treatment.
Do you think that the law should be changed so that it would be impossible to discriminate in the workplace against somebody on the grounds of their sexual orientation?
Yes, I think it's a basic human right.
Okay, Alan, as a vicar, how do you feel about that?
Well, certainly we would be against any change in the law.
We protect people on the grounds of their sex or their gender or their religion, don't we? Why not on the basis of their sexual orientation?
I think that there are lots of laws in relation to these matters that would prevent anybody just being sacked on that basis.
Yeah, is that true?
No, unfortunately that's not actually true. A case called Saunders versus Scottish Holidays, where a man was sacked on the grounds that his employer thought that some of his customers might feel that a gay man was a threat to children, and the employer admitted that he knew this to be a complete fallacy, and he still persisted in sacking the man. So there was an appeal to the Industrial Tribunal and later on to the court, and the court upheld the sacking.
Mandy, should there be a law that says an employer cannot sack somebody on the grounds of their sexual orientation?
An employer shouldn't have the right to discriminate simply because he is an employer.
Ever?
No.
Are there any jobs, in your view, which in which an employer would be justified in saying, because you're homosexual, or you're gay, or lesbian, you're not suitable?
I can't see it.
Well, I think there probably would be certain jobs that they shouldn't be allowed to do by law. Well, I certainly would have a problem with, for example, dealing with children.
If somebody was openly and known and avowedly saying, I believe in a gay man or a gay woman, I would have severe reservations about them being a counsellor.
Why shouldn't a gay man or woman be a counsellor?
Because when you are counselling somebody, it's very possible for you to transmit and transplant your method of thinking on to them.
I mean, just to take Raymond's point, a counsellor, somebody who is offering counsel to somebody who is gay, his concern is that somehow a way of thinking which does not conform to the norm might be passed on, and that would be wrong.
Well, every situation would have to be monitored. If the person was not doing their job, then there would be cause for concern, and that's where I would raise the difficulties of employing anyone in a set of circumstances.
I think too that it would be important to recognise the point in relation to counselling and all these things, that there have been some serious cases, and I mean we are all aware of these cases that have taken place, and I think that there has to be the proper approach adopted, and that due caution and care has to be taken by government.
Would you have a problem with Mandy here being a teacher of young girls?
Well, I mean, not in the sense of if she was just teaching young girls. I don't have a problem with anybody doing their job if they're doing it properly. I have a problem with people who would then abuse their position, as has been in various cases, unfortunately, in society.
So if she was just doing her job and her employer said, I'm sorry, but we can't have a lesbian teaching young girls, I'm going to have to sack you, would you feel that that was reasonable?
There must be a specific reason then for him saying that.
Do you think it is justified for the law to say that somebody can be sacked purely because of their sexual orientation? Obviously, if they break the rules or their contract, that's different.
I don't think that there's any need for a law. There are enough laws already, and I don't think that there should be any more.
But the fact is, you say there are enough laws, but the laws protect certain individuals. The law currently protects male and female. The law currently protects people on the grounds of their religious or political belief.
But just being gay or lesbian, there is no reason in your view why that should ever preclude somebody from getting a job.
I can't think of any particular circumstance which would include that.
Isn't the dilemma here for the people who want equality that we just haven't really been able to work it out as a society, whether we really do believe that a lesbian lifestyle or a gay lifestyle is natural or unnatural?
So that the law should be blind as to what an individual's sexual orientation is. In general terms, sexual orientation should be protected in terms of access to employment, access to goods, facilities and services, and education.
From your own personal experience, is the law enough?
No, it's woefully inadequate, and I'm afraid we're only starting to address the problem.
A homosexual can challenge discrimination because of their sexuality, but at the moment they have to take their case to the European Court of Human Rights. After the autumn of next year, though, the European Convention on Human Rights will become part of UK law, and such cases will then be heard in courts over here.
UK Law returns at the same time next Sunday.
For any details of the items covered in this week's programme, we've produced a free fact sheet. For a copy, please write to UK Law 5, P.O. Box 55, London W12 8UE, or you can ring the Channel 5 order line on 0990 55 50 55. And if you think you have a problem with the law that we might be interested in for a future programme, call the UK Law hotline on 0891 700 151.